The mission of how I started podcasting and started Special Chronicles is giving respect and voice to those of us with special needs. I became an athlete leader of Special Olympics Illinois, and when I recorded the audio of the speeches that I was given and putting those up as podcasts, I soon received messages of encouragement, and I learned that it was a powerful platform and really helping to make a difference in people's lives. 12 years ago, I didn't expect that anybody would want to even listen to me. We have over 42,316 listeners per month. It's a humbling experience. I'm really grateful to make a difference in other people's lives.
Donovan, and I just want to do a shout out for the hashtag Pledge to Include. It's Best Buddies Month, and the theme this year is connection. And I believe in connection with my whole heart. And I also believe in inclusion, true inclusion, making sure everyone's at the table, everyone has a voice, everyone is included. So important, and it really is what makes the world go round. And also, I would go as far to say it saves lives. So make a connection, include everyone you possibly can, reach out to people that you might not have otherwise, and just enjoy each other. Anyway, thank you so much. Pledge to include.
This is the show where we're broadcasting disability stories from an insider's perspective, and we are giving a voice to people with special needs. This is your weekly guide to find and enjoy acceptance and inclusion.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
You're listening to the Special Chronicles Show. Coming up on this episode 415, we're talking with Dr. Jackie Judo. Should I ask how to pronounce her name? But she is the Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics International. And I realized in the theme song, I should have had an overlay when that theme song was playing, and it's all good. The show is going awesomely. But excited to be back behind the mic as we kick off the month of March 2021 this week as we celebrate Spread the Word to Inclusion Day that happened a couple of days ago, and this week across the country, across the globe, is the annual that happens all year round, but we're already kicking it off now, and we're excited to, as we continue this this conversation, and we've got an exciting announcement about a new podcast series. But first, let's go ahead and put our hands together as we. So all of you listening or watching can put your hands together as well, along with our virtual audience. But we are excited to welcome to the Special Chronicles Show Dr. Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics International, to talk all about Spread the Word to Inclusion and this year's 2021 theme of connection. Welcome, Dr. Jackie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know everyone struggles with that last name. I think it's missing a vowel, but you can just call me Jackie.
Jackie, okay, awesome. So, and we did what our listeners probably don't know is we did a lot of show prep before, and a lot of the guests don't actually type in the Google Doc all the answers, but because the way I like to structure these conversations, these episodes of these podcasts all like a conversation, like I was telling you just before we went on air. But excited to have you on the program today, and we should. Well, why don't we just get it kickstarted with telling our listeners about, if they're listening to this on the Special Chronicles Show, whether you're listening on specialchronicles.com or Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We want to let you all know that we have a brand new podcast series. Same episodes that you love, but the Spread the Word to Inclusion. Oh, I think it's Spread the Word Inclusion Podcast original series. You can find it on specialchronicles.com/spread the word inclusion podcast, or find it on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, so there's that plug just to kind of get it out of the way. And so we're gonna go ahead, and we hold from one of our listeners and one of our previous guests, Brian Donovan. We hold a little message at the beginning. And so before we actually get into the official start of the conversation, I don't know if you want to briefly comment on Brian's message at the beginning of the episode today.
Yeah, I think it really is. We're going to talk about in the next several minutes. I mean, inclusion is really the burning issue of our day, and as he articulated so beautifully, especially in the environment that we're in today, it's just foundational for emotional health. It's foundational for all other sorts of wonderful things like great school performance. That's the educator in me. And of course, it's foundational for, healthier communities and societies. And the best way to talk about it is exactly as Brian talked about it, just to bring to life, our own stories of inclusion and how they can be really, organizing events in ourselves and in our schools and in our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today, and there was a quote, I don't know if you saw it, but I believe SOI posted it last year, but about how about how hate can be met by love, and then how us athletes show love when we are met with hate. And that quote that I said, and I think kind of I think even our mutual friend Tim Shriver even talks about this with the Unite. I don't know if it's an organization, but the Unite
movement, yeah.
And I think that Unite movement really kind of ties in with this whole campaign about how we are spreading the word of inclusion in our communities, in our schools, and our workplaces.
So Tim Shriver, our chairman, he speaks so beautifully to how to respond to hate with love. Mm-hmm. And he really is following a tradition of all of the great healers across the world, Mandela. I mean, you can go down the line. And that message of love, I think, it, resonates with me not only as a Special Olympics movement advocate, but just also as a mother. And I really believe that, especially at this point in time, we need to focus on love and just neutralizing all of the hate that we're seeing across the country and the world.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get it, because we don't have that much time together on this Friday, March 5th, 2021, as we'll record in this in front of a live streamed audience. But why don't you begin by introducing yourself to listeners and tell us your connection with our disabilities community and your role at Special Olympics.
So my technical title is the Senior VP of Global Health and Education. And so what that means is that I oversee our global education work as well as our youth leadership work. And so my background in a snapshot is, after several years in the business world, I went back to study education policy, because I believe that education, which I know is not perfect, but really is the best mechanism that we have to drive social and economic mobility. And so a part of that motivation was to think about education, to learn about education and how it can be used as a tool for mobility, but also to figure out, how can I use my skill set to help kids, especially those who are the most marginalized and underserved. And so I was fortunate to have this opportunity to work for 3 years with the Special and overseeing a national commission on education at the Aspen Institute. And when that commission sunsetted, I was fortunate to be recruited by Tim to join the Special Olympics movement.
Awesome. And I know on behalf of the over 6 million athletes and behalf of our class of Sargent Shriver International Global Messengers, we're glad that you have joined our movement and are really leading not only the Spread the Word to Inclusion movement, but the youth leaders. And because I did a live podcast taping at the Youth Leadership Summit a couple years ago. I think just maybe it was a year before. Yeah, it was a year before the world shut down, and so the youth that you are already leading in this movement are going to take inclusion into the future. So.
Yeah, I think that podcast was that in Abu Dhabi, Daniel?
No, that was actually here in Chicago. That was
okay, great. Yeah.
Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think that what you're doing is so important to the movement, because it's all about giving voice to those who really are living their lives of inclusion, not only by taking the pledge, but then by acting on that pledge. Yeah. And as you have, so beautifully demonstrated in your own life, you are one of the hallmarks, the flagships of those who have really taken inclusion to heart, not only because you've been a beneficiary of those who have chosen to include, but now you're playing it forward and you're giving it to others out there.
And I think that's the leading example that we can, when we talk about Spread the Word inclusion, not just on podcasts like we're doing today, and not just in our communities and workplaces, but really, and not just making the pledge, but not just taking the pledge, but really acting the pledge of inclusion every day, and not just on March 3rd, not just like on the day that you make the pledge, but all year round. And I think that's what we'll get to a little bit later as we continue this conversation, especially about this year's 2021 theme, but all year round.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the talk, it's the walk.
It's the walk, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And which is why, and we'll talk about it, which is why this campaign is really about empowering grassroots leaders in communities, whether it's schools or workplaces or local clubs, to not only challenge, friends and coworkers and family members to take the pledge, but then to actually commit to acting on that pledge by including.
Awesome. I love that. I just want to, I'm making a few notes on it, that what you just said, that it's not just the talk, but the walk. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's not just the talk, it's the walk.
Awesome.
And the feelings that each of us experience when we do walk the talk is one that, for me, I view this role that I'm in as an absolute gift. It's an absolute gift to contribute.
Awesome. Well, let's now continue this conversation, and as you just introduce yourself, now get into a little bit briefly about your backstory in Special Olympics. So talk to us for a little bit about how you came to work at Special Olympics International, and really how you came into the movement of Special Olympics and your current role with the youth and education programs globally.
Yeah. So I had this incredible opportunity to focus on a agenda for what we call whole child education across the U.S., leading a national commission that released a series of recommendations in the beginning of 2019. And as part of that experience, it really spoke to notions of equity and social justice and inclusion as really foundational to the learning setting for all children. And to understand that learning is not about academics and then one's, social well-being, but it actually, they're the same. You cannot create learning settings unless they also cannot create healthy learning settings unless they also engage learners emotionally and socially. And central to that has to be this notion of inclusion. Absolutely inclusion. And really, as we'll talk about, connection, because at the root of that is relationships. And so when you create those environments, then you really start to create environments where children can really, all children can learn to the best of their ability. So that's what really, that background where I really had this incredible opportunity to work with leading educators across the country. And when I say leading educators, it was a group of, we had representation from the military, representation from school districts, leading school districts around the country, policymakers, a ton of researchers really come together and push forward with a more holistic view of what it takes for children and young people to learn. And that's where my paths crossed with Tim. And it's not surprising because the work of the Special Olympics is completely aligned with what we see the needs in education across the US. And then if you step back even and look at the world is moving along those same lines, where we're starting to understand that if you really want to develop children from an educational, from a health, from an athletic perspective, you really, most foundational is to make sure that you create environments where all are included.
Awesome. And you mentioned one of the things about your background is with emotional, and I do know from reading Tim's book, Fully Alive, Discovering What Matters Most, I believe I've got it on my bookshelf in my room, in the other room, not in my studio here, but I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Tim, I believe, has a background in education and as an educator, and especially with, I think, co-founded in social and emotional learning. So
he did, yes, yeah.
Can you maybe talk?
Yeah, sure, yeah. So Tim is an educator by training, and he started many years ago an organization called CASTLE, and it's a collaborative on academic and social and emotional learning. And it was he was eons ahead of the rest of the world in understanding that you really need to start thinking about creating learning settings where it's based on a foundation of social and emotional health in order to really maximize the academic performance of students. And what happened from the time that he founded that organization to the last several years is we went through a period in the US which was well-meaning, but we call it the No Child Left Behind period, where the focus really shifted to very kind of single-minded emphasis on test scores. And along the way, we lost our way. We lost our way, and that's a whole separate podcast. But what was clear at the end of that road is that we needed to kind of recalibrate, to kind of like reboot, and to recognize that in order to learn, we have to take care of students' full needs, not just their academic, but that those academic needs are completely dependent upon their social and emotional health.
Awesome. And I wanted to briefly comment. I'm trying to pull up a clip here, not on a video, but of what you said about the No Child Left Behind. And this is me trying to post stuff up in the middle of a podcast. Anyways, what you said about No Child Left Behind, and there's an artist, I don't know if you've heard of Tom Chapin. His brother was Haley Chapin. I used to go to the concerts when I was younger, and even most recently, he had a concert up in Evanston about 6-7 years ago. I got to interview him backstage. But anyways, he has a song called "Not on the Test," and he gave us permission to play his music. So I thought we could maybe just hear
yeah, that would be so great. Not on the tests.
Yeah,
tests are overrated, by the way.
Yeah, so I thought we could hear a clip of his song "Not on the Test," and I'm pretty sure I pulled up the right. The right clip. Oh, here we go. Okay, I found it. So this is because it's related to this. I'll talk about education, and after we hear a clip of this, we'll give an overview of the annual Spread the Word to Inclusion campaign, and really how we can make improvement in education through connection and inclusion, and we'll talk about that after. But here's
absolutely.
Here's a clip of Tom Chapin's "Not on the Test."
Go on to sleep now, third grader of mine. The test is tomorrow, but you'll do just fine. It's reading and math, forget all the rest. You don't need to know what is not on the test. Each box that you mark on each test that you take, remember your teachers, their jobs are at stake. Your score is their score, but don't get all stressed. They'd never teach anything not on the test. The school board is faced with no child left behind, with rules but no funding, they're caught in a bind. So music and art and the things you love best are not in your school, 'cause they're not on the test. Sleep, and as you progress, you'll learn there's a lot that is not on the test. Debate is a skill that is useful to know, unless you're in Congress or talk radio, where shouting and spouting and spewing are blessed, 'cause rational discourse was not on the test. Thinking's important, it's good to know how, and someday you'll learn to, but some days not now. Go on to sleep now, you need your rest. Don't think about thinking, it's not on the test.
And again, that was "Not on the Test" by Tom Chapin, used with permission. I can send you that.
That would be great. That's a perfect bridge to the spread the word, inclusion campaign that we're going to talk about. Yeah. What he's doing, and I'm not really smiling because it's sad, the implications of that well-meaning policy agenda were that we really lost sight of the whole child. And most fundamental to the whole child is the notion of relationships. And fundamental to relationships is the idea of connection, which we're going to talk about. Spread the word inclusion.
Awesome.
It's all about connection. If you have connections, and this is not Dr. Jackie talking. This is a huge body of literature demonstrating in the evidence base that if you can create connections between peers, between teachers and students, you can really create learning environments where there's a tremendous amount of learning, better learning going on. And in fact, you're going to get better test scores.
Awesome. Yeah. I believe what you said of how the song "Not on the Test" by Tom Chapin is a perfect bridge to our conversation right now. And we can maybe give our listeners a brief overview of the Spread the Word inclusion, of what this is all about, and then we'll after that we'll take a brief sponsor partner break, because podcast sponsors and partners is how we're able to stay on air. If it wasn't for our supporters, we wouldn't be able to get behind the microphone and keep all the lights on. But we'll continue talking about this with the 2021 theme and stuff after the break. But first, give our listeners a brief overview of the Spread the Word inclusion.
Well, first of all, I have to draw attention to my T-shirt, and immediately after this podcast, I'm going to send Daniel a T-shirt as well on Spread the Word inclusion. So the campaign began in 2019 as Spread the Word to End the Word, and at that point, it focused, during its first 10 years, on really addressing a powerful form of exclusion, and that is the R word. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to 2019, the campaign became Spread the Word inclusion, where the focus was not just on eliminating the word, but on really the creation of a new reality where inclusion for all people is the new reality, and those specifically, people for all people with and without intellectual and developmental disabilities. So what's so important to know about this campaign is that it's global and that it's single-mindedly, as I said earlier, focused on empowering those grassroots leaders in communities. So we're talking about schools and workplaces and the local clubs and friends and coworkers and family members, and really asking everyone to take the pledge. And then again, not just to take the pledge, but then to act on that pledge and be a leader in inclusion.
Awesome. And I for the podcast listeners, go check out the video on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, and you can see the banner that I put up on the screen, spreadtheword.global/pledge. And again, we will put that link in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, just look down below. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, the links will be in the show notes in the description below, in the show notes below. But I wanted to before we take that break, I want to briefly comment on what you said. We had Soen Palumbo, one of the co-founders of the Spread the Word, has actually, he's been a guest a few times, and actually one of our first guests on this podcast so many years ago. And since then he's been on a few times, and we've connected at a few global Special Olympics events, from Abu Dhabi to the 50th anniversary. And one thing that he said, and if people look up Spread the Word Inclusion podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, they can listen to a conversation that Soen and I had. I forgot which episode it was, but it's marked in the title of the episode, so you'll be able to find it. But something that he said about how rebranding the Spread the Word movement to inclusion, and how not a lot of the global countries don't know it's not the same as the R word is not the same as we refer to it in the US. And I really, as somebody that has dealt with bullying and intolerance in my younger years, I'm grateful that you guys have rebranded this, because as much as the R word is hurtful, it goes, I think this Spread the Word campaign and making the pledge to inclusion, it goes beyond just the one word. And by making inclusion a way of life, like what I wrote about in my newest blog, by making inclusion a way of life, that's how it goes beyond just the one word, and that's how we can
Absolutely.
make connect.
Yeah. I think that I mean, what you're pointing out is absolutely the case. This notion of spread the word inclusion really brings the campaign to a more global level. It really brings it to a much bigger idea that truly reflects the potential of inclusion as really a mechanism to create, better societies, not just, better, not, and I should say not just, but
Yeah.
and communities, but society overall. So I think that one of the most important things about rebranding this, about bringing it to the level of what it means globally, is then we really start to talk about inclusion in terms of really becoming a social movement, and that's once the talk becomes the walk. And once we start to scale this idea really around the world, in using language, as you said, that connects with, and we're using the word connection, that connects with people in communities and societies around the world, then we're going to really make an impact. I want to comment. I want to comment on your recent blog, because it really.
Oh, could we just take a quick
Absolutely
responsive break and leave that as a tease to this conversation is so engaging, but we'll pick up on that after the break.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's talk about your blog for a minute, because I loved it.
Awesome. So August is Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics International. You are listening to the Special Chronicles Show on specialchronicles.com. We'll be back after a quick message from our supporters. Support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. As an independent public media podcast, Special Chronicles will always be there for you. Now we're asking you to be there for us. As a nonprofit independent media organization, we can only make programs like Special Chronicles with listener support. Our programs provide weekly, candid, honest, and inspiring conversations about the people with disabilities community that creates awareness, support, and advocacy within and everyone else who is able to listen to stories about life from a different angle. Please, if you and your family love our weekly podcast, make a one-time, monthly, or annual gift of thanks today. Support this podcast at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. Support for Special Chronicles comes from ComEd. Special Chronicles is proud to partner with the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program. The Energy Force is the country's first energy efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. ComEd is powering lives, and really is powering us here at Special Chronicles to keep the lights on and our technology is powered on. As ComEd powers the lives of us, they're literally giving a voice to people with special needs. We thank ComEd for the generous support of our mission at Special Chronicles. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd.
Hi, my name is Lisa Noble, and I'm a ComEd Energy Force Ambassador and an athlete with Special Olympics Illinois.
Hi, my name is Daniel Smrokowski, and I also am a ComEd Energy Force Ambassador and founder of a company called Special Chronicles.
The ComEd Energy Force program is a program that hires people with disabilities to teach the public how to save energy and money.
It's the country's first energy efficiency program of its kind.
Saving energy is especially important while everyone is at home due to COVID-19. We're using more electricity than ever before. Just think about how many more times you are opening the refrigerator door these days.
And while the economy is stressed, it's more critical than ever to save money where we can. Following these tips can save energy and money in this time of COVID-19.
Wash your clothes in cold water and use the dryer sparingly.
Your dryer can take up to 7 times more energy than the washer.
Turn off and unplug any electrical devices or power strips you are not using.
Electrical devices can continue to zap power even when turned off if they're still plugged in. We call them vampire devices.
Use LED bulbs.
They use 25% less energy than incandescent bulbs and last up to 25 times longer, saving you lots of money over time.
Keep your refrigerator between 35 and 38 degrees.
And be sure to use Energy Star appliances.
And last but not least, check out PodmanDan.com/home savings for more tips and rebates.
Lisa and I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today.
Remember, we are all in this together.
Stay healthy.
And stay safe.
Bye.
COVID-19, better known as coronavirus, has spread throughout the world. Information about children with this disease is limited, but they are known to have had mild symptoms. Many organizations are responding accordingly depending upon their area. It's best to stay home and away from others, especially when sick, and continue following healthy hand wash guidelines, covering mouth and nose and not touching your face or high-touch surfaces. Clean and disinfect high-touch surfaces regularly, and for more information, please visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Thank you.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising. Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
Equality.
dignity,
and the recognition of our
shared humanity.
We will not stop.
Or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
More divided than ever. And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution is inclusion. Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
Special Chronicles. Giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
You're listening to the Special Chronicles Show. This is episode 415. I think I got that episode right, 415. And our guest is, I think I got that right. Our guest is Dr. Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics. Welcome back, Jackie.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
And just before that break, and I didn't want to interrupt the conversation because it was so engaging, but briefly, in case we have listeners just tuning in now, we remind our listeners just briefly to backtrack just a little bit. Of course, they can rewind the podcast, but just remind the listeners just briefly, kind of get our listeners up to speed on. You were just about to mention, do shameless plug, but mention my newest SSIGM blog on Spread the Word, on connecting the world.
Well, it's an important plug to make. It's an important plug to make. I had a chance to read your recent blog, and it touched me. First of all, it spoke to the basic human right of all to work, right? And that everyone has a right to work, and just the importance of work to one's sense of purpose. And secondly, it was a reminder to me of the damage, during when you talked about, your youth and how you had experienced some bullying, but it reminded me of the damage that bullying can have on young people. And that is absolutely, one of the, I think, misunderstood. I mean, bullying we all know to be a terrible thing, but I don't think that we fully recognize the impact it can have in terms of, lasting scars for some children.
Yeah.
And finally, what was so hopeful about your blog was that it illustrated how something as simple as an invitation, to connect, to include, can really change one's life. So I love the blog.
Awesome. And so we want to remind our listeners, if you're listening and you want to read that blog and be first, let me say thank you for the kind words on that blog. I kind of recrafted a little bit of a unpublished blog from a year ago that was never published, and then I kind of recrafted it to fit with the 2021 theme of connection. So if dear listeners, if you want to read the blog, the link to my newest blog, I think it was titled "Connecting the World to Spread the Word of Inclusion." I think that's right. I don't have it. Well, technically, I've got it up in another tab, but I don't feel like checking. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Connecting the world to spread the word of inclusion. I think that's the title of the blog. Anyways, the link to it will be in the show notes below. So just go look in the show notes. So right below, if you listen to this on Special Chronicles or Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or YouTube, just look in the show notes below, and the link will be there. And with that, let's now go into you gave us an overview of spread the word inclusion, but now if you were in an elevator, and I realize this elevator speech, if it really depends on how long you are in that elevator. It really depends on how many floors you are going up. Like I know when we had a exam training at SOI down in when we came to Washington D.C. a couple years ago, we had to go up a few floors. But I think it really, or like if you go to the headquarters of United Airlines, which is at Willis Tower in Chicago, that's a lot of levels, like 20, whatever. Well, it's probably more than 20 floors, but it really depends on how many floors you're going up. So I guess the elevator speech, if you're going up one floor, it could be really short. But if you're going up like 20, 30 to 100 floors, that elevator speech could be long. So,
well, let's assume that we're not in a high rise.
Yes.
Let's assume that we have to be disciplined.
Yeah.
So what's my elevator speech? Well, Spread the Word Inclusion is a grassroots campaign, and it's calling on all of us to commit and then act on that commitment to be inclusive, not only in our personal lives, but in our professional lives. So at the end of the day, it means respect, empathy, and not just tolerance for difference, but an acceptance of difference in others.
Awesome.
So I think that was probably about 2 floors.
2 flows. Awesome. 2 flows. Awesome. So, and let's continue. And our guest is Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics. We're talking about spread the word inclusion and this 2021 theme of connection, which I think is a perfect for this year, 2021. Really, I think the connection is a perfect theme for this spread the word inclusion campaign. And one of the prompts I had for speaking to that blog, that newest blog that you read, that I wrote, one of the prompts was really if we could talk about inclusion and the words inclusion and connection, and how are those 2 words, inclusion and connection, connected. And I think it's really fit in with where we all still in a global pandemic from last year, 2020, and now this year we're kind of still in that. That's why during that break, our listeners heard that PSA for from the CDC, because we're still in, and it still applies this year. And that what you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, the need for connection, that need for connection and inclusion working together is so vitally needed. And I believe, I think our North America region tweeted a picture, a quote of mine from that blog that you read. I don't know if you saw that. They tweeted that a few days ago, and I forgot the quote that I wrote in the blog, but it spoke to the vital need in society to have connection and inclusion working together. So with that, tell us about the 2021 theme of connection, and did your team pick this because this last year we have all been isolated in the global pandemic? I mean, I'm sure that's probably an important reason, but talk to us a little bit about how
Sure. Yeah.
this 2021 theme of connection, and really how connection and inclusion, how it's so vitally so vitally needed this year more than ever.
Well, first of all, in regard to the COVID isolation, it's certainly an important reason. COVID has taken a terrible toll on educating our young children. It's impacted small businesses and workers, and it's had an impact on our emotional health. For COVID, the pandemic has magnified the issue, and for many, it's made it worse. Mm-hmm. So, we've seen that the effects of social isolation on not only in the U.S. but on our global community, and we saw really over the last several months powerful reminders of overdue action needed for justice and equity. And so, having listened to and reflected on the experiences of the Spread the Word community, we believe that it's even more important than ever to build connection through inclusion. So, as important is this idea of connection to young people. So what do we know about connection? Well, what we know is that without connection to each other, without connection to our peers, without connection to a goal or a mission, our families, friends, that without even connection to a community, albeit school or faith or even a yoga class, that we don't have an internal anchor. We're afloat. We're alone. And so with connection, we have feelings of inclusion and acceptance that help us really figure out how we fit into the world and where and how we belong. So when I think about inclusion and connection, I think about different sides of the same coin. And by the way, again, this is supported by a huge body of literature to understand that connection, and relationship is often the articulation of connection, is absolutely essential to us as social beings.
Awesome. Well, I really love that you guys picked that connection theme for this year, because like what we've been talking about, it's so inclusion and connection is so vitally needed in society today, and even the logo, of how it's, I don't know how you would describe the logo and how you've got the typical colors for the spread the word inclusion, and then the two arrows pointing, but then the connection theme it's a rainbow colors, I believe. Is it?
Yes.
Can you maybe briefly?
They go together. Absolutely, yeah. That was intentional. They go together. And again, it's to the point of my point that there are two sides of the same coin, and without connection, you can't have inclusion, and without inclusion, you can't have connection. And it's fundamental to us as social beings that we have both.
Awesome. Well, now let's move on. And March 3rd was, and I guess briefly before I mention that, I know like in Illinois program and probably other states in the countries as well, it's Respect Week. Can you maybe tell us how, I think that there are some of our Special Olympics programs that are referring to this first week of March as Respect Week. Is that a unified champion? Like, is that a national or a global unified champion schools initiative, or kind of, I guess what, like, I mean, I'm sure
I think that, yeah, right.
It's all related, but like what's what's the difference, or how is Respect Weekend spread the word to inclusion? How are they both kind of the same? Or
Right. So I think that they're absolutely connected. They're absolutely connected. And respect is one articulation of inclusion, and it really is an important part of the message. But the difference, and probably a but isn't the best conjunction to use here. So I'll switch that to and. And the piece with connection is it really speaks to, it's bi-directional. It speaks to relationship. Respect tends to be more of an expectation, and that we ask others to give us. And connection brings it to a different level, where connection is talking about us relating to and respecting one another and developing a relationship.
Awesome. And I know, and we both, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are probably more in the Special Olympics movement side of it. But if people are watching the video, like what they see on the my background here, and this background, just so listeners know, is one of the Zoom backgrounds of resources that you guys that your team put out. But in addition to Special Olympics, Best Buddies is also one of the organizations that's like Special Olympics and Best Buddies are the two leading out of a lot of other organizations like Special Chronicles, and like we as Special Chronicles, we definitely support the campaign as well, but Special Olympics and Best Buddies are the two kind of leading organizations. And I think there was a message from Tim's brother Anthony that was on Instagram that I was going to play, but I didn't have the video file, and so I didn't know exactly how to add it to the stream. But I think Best Buddies talks about a lot of these same issues. I know, like in high school, I was involved in my Best Buddies club, but is it maybe speak? I know you're not waiting with Best Buddies, but maybe talk briefly. And we were going to have one of their senior vice presidents. We called a video message, but he didn't get it in on time. So, David, if you're listening, we can try to have you on in the future. But maybe
Best Buddies is a great organization because it really creates, it's all in support of relationships, and mentoring relationships, and it's part of the whole movement. It's part of the whole movement.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, critical partners, as you are, of the, Spread the Word campaign. And it's particularly, an important partnership when we think about this year's message, spread the word, inclusion, connection, because that's what Best Buddies is attempting and successfully attempting to support.
Yeah. And I think when hopefully all our listeners can, when they get involved in the word inclusion, through whether they get involved in the Best Buddies program in the school or in the community or workplace, and they form that friendship, that's one part of how to make that connection of inclusion. But then also the same thing you could, when they get involved in our unified sports or in a unified club, like those kind of, I guess, two powerful ways that people can really form that connection of inclusion.
Yeah, it's walking the talk, right?
Yeah,
it's walking the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on now. And March 3rd, just 2 days ago from the time that we're recording this, March 3rd was not only my dad's birthday.
Happy birthday, Daniel's dad.
I'm not going to say his age, but my dad's birthday was March 3rd. In addition to that, which is Spread the Word Inclusion Day. And this whole first week of March is Respect Week, Spread the Word Inclusion Week in many schools and communities across the globe. So spread the word inclusion, as we have talked about for the past 53 minutes now, is on this episode, focuses on spreading inclusion for all the people, those of us with disabilities around the entire globe. And as you just talked about, this year's theme is connection. So tell us now, briefly, what does this one particular day mean to you? I know, and like what I think I mentioned at the end of one of the points I made in the blog that I wrote, is how it's not just about making that pledge of inclusion, making that pledge of connection and inclusion on this one particular March 3rd day, but really taking that and taking that pledge and making a walk of inclusion and connection all year round. So I guess to say that's what it means to me. So now if you could share kind of what
Absolutely. Yeah. Is a critical. It provides a focal point, a launching point for us to really regenerate our commitment to inclusion and connection. And it's a day of hope, right? It's a day of hope that we recognize that in a world where everyone is meaningfully included, that there are endless possibilities for creativity, collaboration, and progress. Brené Brown defines connection as feeling seen and heard and valued. And it's recognized in that definition that meaningful inclusion goes beyond inviting someone to sit down with you at lunch and supporting them and having sitting down with someone at lunch, but it goes to the point where you want to support them, beyond joining you, to actually having a voice in that conversation. So I think that March 3rd is all about recognizing this incredible vision, to reinvigorating that vision, and to encouraging all of us to not only pledge to that vision, but to also pledge to acting on that vision in our lives, and inviting those into our lives and giving them voice.
Awesome. And I want to remind our listeners, you can make your pledge for inclusion at spreadtheword.global/pledge. And so, sorry, my dad was outside of the studio. It's hard to kind of talk on air with that.
Happy birthday. Belated.
Yeah, I've got headphones on. I'll have him listen to this podcast later. So with that, as I lose my train of thought here, how does inclusion? Let's move on. And how does our guest is Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics. We're talking all about spread the word inclusion and this year's 2021 theme of connection. What does, like you see, if you're watching the video on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, go check out the video on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, and you see the T-shirt Jackie's wearing, the T-shirt that I will soon be wearing, and the background on my background here that you see. But with that, how does inclusion affect all of us? We talked about it a lot in this episode already, but how does include? And maybe we'll. I'm going to add just a side question that tie with this, and that is connection. How does inclusion and connection affect all of us in society?
Yeah. So at its very core, it provides an internal anchor. I mentioned this internal anchor, and that if we have inclusion and if we have connection to others, it really helps us center ourselves and figure out how we fit in the world and where and how we belong.
Awesome. Well, and we mentioned already, and because we already, I kind of, my written notes, I jumped ahead of what we planned out in the Google Doc. So we'll maybe move on, but as a bridge or a transition to what we'll get to, and we're gonna take a quick another brief, not as long as last time, not a 5-minute break, but just a brief 1-minute sponsor break, because we're nearing the bottom of the hour. But wrap up in like less than 30 seconds. How does inclusion and connection go together? If you sum it up in like less than 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Inclusion and connection are part of the same, they're really two sides of the same coin. You've got connection on one side and you've got inclusion on the other. They absolutely go together. Without connection, you can't have inclusion, and without inclusion, you cannot have connection to others. And the way we think about that, the way we realize this in our daily lives is, relationship with others, building relationships with others. That's what it's all about when we start talking about ourselves as social human beings, and we are social human beings.
Awesome. Well, that's a powerful message. We're going to go ahead and take one last sponsor, partner, supporter break. And when we come back, we'll get into some final messages and social media plugs and final messages of what inclusion means to Jackie. Our guest is Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics. We're talking about spread the word to inclusion. Connection, all is coming up. We'll continue after the break right here on SpecialChronicles.com. Support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. As an independent public media podcast, Special Chronicles will always be there for you. Now we're asking you to be there for us. As a nonprofit independent media organization, we can only make programs like Special Chronicles with listener support. Our programs provide weekly, candid, honest, and inspiring conversations about the people with disabilities community that creates awareness, support, and advocacy within each week's episode. Listeners tell us our shows are an enjoyable and necessary podcast for the intellectual and developmental disability community and everyone else who is able to listen to stories about life from a different angle. Please, if you and your family love our weekly podcast, make a one-time, monthly, or annual gift of thanks today. Support this podcast at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. Support for Special Chronicles comes from ComEd. Special Chronicles is proud to partner with the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program. The Energy Force is the country's first energy efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. ComEd is powering lives and really is powering us here at Special Chronicles to keep the lights on and our technology is powered on. As ComEd powers the lives of us, they're literally giving a voice to people with special needs. We thank ComEd for the generous support of our mission at Special Chronicles. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd. And ComEd Radio is powering lives.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising. Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
equality,
dignity, and the recognition of our shared humanity.
We will not stop.
or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
More divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution is inclusion. Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
You're listening to the Special Chronicles show this on specialchronicles.com. I'm Daniel, founder of Special Chronicles. I don't know if I even introduced myself at the beginning of the episode an hour ago. Did I? Maybe not.
I'm not sure.
I honestly can't remember what I said at the beginning of the episode, and I don't think I did. But I'm Daniel, founder of Special Chronicles and a Sargent Shriver International Global Messenger with Special Olympics. usually just comes off the top of my head after the theme song, and I don't know if I don't think I actually did. I don't know. So listeners, tell me if I did. Comment or email us feedback@specialchronicles.com and let me know. Our guest is Jackie, Senior Vice President of Global Youth and Education at Special Olympics. And as we near a close, I want to our listeners hold a PSA for the inclusion revolution, which, as you know, is another big message, I guess, a message that we have at Special Olympics. And again, those that idea, that way of life of inclusion when we talk about the inclusion revolution. And people can go on and sign another inclusion pledge at jointherevolution.org. But maybe just so if our listeners are all confused, tell us, I guess, how are these two pledges similar or different, or is there any connection between the inclusion revolution and going to jointherevolution.org to sign that inclusion pledge, and then when they go to spreadtheworld.global and sign that inclusion pledge, how are these two inclusion pledges similar or different?
They're separate. They're separate campaigns, but they're part of the same movement. They're separate campaigns, but they're part of the same movement.
Awesome.
And so I really hope that to get the social media pledge in here, I connect on social media and follow, at Pledge to Include, and it's tag Pledge to Include, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok. It's all there. I'm Dr. Jodel on Twitter, but I really encourage everyone to take the pledge, and then to act on that pledge in their lives.
Awesome. Again, people see watching the video, they see the banners, but again, it'll be the same links will be in the show notes. Spreadtheworld.global/pledge and hashtag pledge to include at pledge to include. Briefly, you mentioned, I'm not going to make you repeat the comments on my newest blog, but I don't know if you read my fellow Sona SSI GMs, Renee from Hawaii and Hannah from Colorado also wrote similar blogs on this Spread the Word Inclusion Connection Day. I don't know if you read any of their blogs, but I don't know if you read any of their blogs or.
Yes. So, I think, again, it's like they're stories. We're storytelling. We're really, they're just, again, bringing, shedding light on so many of our stories. And this is the best way to demonstrate to the world how important this is through these individual stories.
Awesome. And with someone, I know there's not that many of us with intellectual disabilities that have gone to college, but I did in about in December 2012, got a bachelor's degree in journalism. So with that love of journalism and love of storytelling, I love sharing these stories, not just on this podcast program, on this podcast network as Special Chronicles, but also through the blogs that we're writing for our Sona region. And I think occasionally make an appearance on SOI's website, I guess. But
what you're doing is so important because you're telling the story.
Yeah.
You're telling the story, and it's the power of written word. It's the power of stories and bringing these issues to light, so people begin to understand them, and then with that understanding, it's the first step toward inclusion and connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And through the power of those stories that we're telling, through the power of creating that, of having our listeners either listen or read these stories, then they will have that better understanding, and then we'll be able to make a connection to inclusion as a walk of life. And it starts with the power of of a story. So with that, and ever since the Abu Dhabi Daily Show, that this video podcast series on SpecialOlympics.org, I don't know if you watched, me and then Ian from Great Britain, we both co-hosted a video series during our times at World Games. And I usually ended a lot of my podcast conversations with, what does inclusion mean to you? So as we come to a close now, I'll ask you the same thing. What does inclusion mean to you? We talked about it a lot on this episode, all about spread the word, inclusion, connection. And Jackie just ended. She just, maybe she lost internet. I will try to, I think I have a phone number. Let me see if I can try to call her up on the phone as we're wrapping up this episode, and let's see if we can try to bring her on the show. I'm trying to find her phone number so we can try to call her on the show. Let's see if, I don't know if I have a phone number. I really should have the guest of the phone numbers. We can bring her on to the show, but I don't know if I can totally bring her onto the show through audio. I really should have gotten her. Oh, there we go. She's
I'm back. I'm back. I'm not sure if it was my internet or yours, but I'm back.
I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna
to close.
Yeah. It's time to close. I was trying to find your phone number to actually call you on.
Yeah.
To call you on the phone, but okay. So because our internet is kind of wacky, what does what this one of these final two questions that I have for you is, what does inclusion mean to you?
Well, inclusion has deep personal meaning to me as a mother of 3 adult boys. One of the most painful parts of being a mother was when my boys were victims of bullying because they dared to be different. And I think that all of that could have been avoided if they were in school communities that had embraced inclusion. So that's the personal story of my commitment to inclusion.
Awesome. And we mentioned the social media plugs, but just to remind our listeners as we come to a close, how can our listeners connect with you on social media and the Spread the Word to Inclusion campaign? And I'll put the panels up on the screen as you.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter, Dr. Dodal on Twitter. My boys set up my Twitter account a while ago, teasing me with Dr. Dodal, but I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and of course on LinkedIn, Jacqueline Jodal. So please, reach out.
Awesome. Let me just put those. I think I put it up on. Let me put up on the screen for listeners on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You said at Dr. Jodal. That's
Dr. Jodal. Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's update it, and I will try to remember if I have time to put it in the show notes. But it's people can just go on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and search for @doc. I totally let's try that again. Hopefully I'll get this right. At Dr.Jodl. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's right.
There we go. So that's if you want to follow Jackie, and then for the Spread the Word Inclusion campaign.
Yes, and so it's at Pledge to Include, and the tag is it's the tag is the Pledge to Include as well. Awesome,
and they can go to learn more about the Spread the Word Inclusion.
Absolutely, yeah. It's on. You can go to the spread the word. If you just follow, at Pledge to Include on any of the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, it's there. And we really encourage you to take the pledge and then to actually bring that pledge into your daily lives.
So once again, if people are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, on any of the social media, look for @pledge to include and the links to take the pledge.
Absolutely. Yep. @pledge to include.
Awesome. @pledge to include. And we will have all those links in the show notes for our listeners to go check out. So as we now come to a close, any final thoughts on overall time today on the Special Chronicles Show that you want to share with all?
Yeah, I want absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you. It was absolutely joyous the last hour talking to you about such an important issue. As I started the burning issue of our time, inclusion. But I want to leave the listeners with a sense of empowerment. You can make a difference by committing to include and then acting on it in your daily lives. So I encourage you to open your doors, to welcome someone in who may look or sound a bit different. You'll be surprised by the sense of connection that simple act can bring.
Awesome. And I love those final thoughts that you shared. And really, if listeners take anything away from this past hour of this episode, that they take that away with them and go and really bring, like what you said, bring this issue of our time of inclusion, bring it as just a walk of life. And hopefully all listeners are empowered to go ahead and do that and go on and take the pledge and make it a walk of life. If our listeners want to follow us on Special Chronicles, specialchronicles.com is where you can go to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to our newsletter. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search for Special Chronicles and you will find us. Specialchronicles.com is where you can go to do that. Again, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We just had an SSIGM training all about a LinkedIn profile, so I'm now a little bit more comfortable with that platform. But at PodmanDan, PodmanDan at PodmanDan is where you can follow me personally. So all those links again will be in the show notes. And again, check out the Spread the Word Inclusion podcast series. And those links as well as if you want to book me to speak. Well, I was going to say in person, but I guess now it's virtually on Zoom. But if you want to book me to speak at your conference or school or event, those links on specialchronicles.com/speaking is where you can find all about all of my speaking engagements on there. So until then, I hope you all will take inclusion to the next level, take inclusion globally to the next level. And coming up next week, you guys are going to want to stay tuned. I'm sure, Jackie, you're going to want to stay tuned as well, because as I believe March is Women's Month, right? Is that right?
It is, absolutely.
So we had you on, and next week we have a really impactful conversation with fellow SSIGM Renee Manfredi, calling in from Hawaii and sharing her self-advocacy story and really how Special Olympics has really changed her life. We both talked about how Special Olympics has changed both of our lives, but that's a 2-hour conversation that you do not want to miss. Coming up next week is when that will go live, when that will drop, as the kids say, when that episode will drop. So stay tuned next week. And we do have, and then after that, we'll have my mentor, Chris, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Special Olympics Illinois. We'll be on in a couple weeks talking all about virtual sports. So I was going to say, if it's Women's Month, we should only have women on this podcast, but
we're talking about inclusion.
We're talking about inclusion. So we want to include all. And so, so stay tuned. Next couple of weeks, we'll have Renee on next week, and then my mentor Chris will be on in a couple of weeks talking about virtual sports. So a lot of exciting content, and stay tuned and go on and at Pledge to Include and sign the pledge. And until then, we will see you next week right here on the Special Chronicles Show on specialchronicles.com. We'll be back next week. And until then, choose to include. Until next week, remember, choose to include.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
All right. Let me go ahead and just end this broadcast.